all across the streets of New York City. It's going in the wrong direction right now in the state, and it's impacting quality of life for everyday New Yorkers. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. We're New Yorkers. And we're seeing people in our own families who are making the very personal decision to have to leave this state for good. People who have young kids who moved to New York City to follow their dream. They weren't raised here. They graduated and went to a job in New York City that they've been spending years dreaming of. And now they're afraid to ride the New York City subway. Some who still will take the New York City subway will share stories about how they have to hold on to guardrails and poles because they're afraid of being pushed into oncoming subway cars. Members of the Asian American community having to see story after story, one of their own pushed in front of an oncoming subway car and killed. Somebody else stabbed to death in their apartment in Lower Manhattan. Somebody else beaten to death with hammers. The Jewish community seeing not just one anti-Semitic attack in a particular week, but having to finish a week where their reflection is on the many violent anti-Semitic attacks that they experienced that week. People should feel free to practice their religion. They should be able to go to church on a Sunday and not worry about being robbed at gunpoint, as we witnessed yesterday. Jewish kids and adults should feel comfortable walking the streets or riding the subway without fear that they're going to be attacked because they're wearing a yarmulke. Sikh cab drivers who are being assaulted because they look different. This is a moment for all of us to come together and to do something about it. This truly is a last stand for New York. The reason is obvious, which is even more frustrating for average everyday New Yorkers. What they want to see when somebody is sitting in that seat as a governor is to identify exactly what the problem is, all of it, not just whatever fits a narrative, identify all of it, proudly accept responsibility. That's the job that you signed up for. If you don't want to accept your duty, your obligation in that position, then you go out of the seat and you let someone else sit in that seat who wants the responsibility to confront it. And then pursue aggressively all of the obvious solutions that are in front of us that allow us to make the streets of New York safer. It is imperative that we repeal cashless bail in the state. Judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness and flight risk and past criminal record, seriousness of the offense on far more offenses. We saw earlier this month in Inwood, 2 Mexican cartel drug smugglers were arrested with $1.2 million worth of crystal meth. Now, the argument that gets made in favor of cashless bail is that somebody with a low-level offense who has a clean record, the offense is one that is not viewed as serious, they're not viewed as a danger to society, they're not viewed as a flight risk, and that they should not be stuck behind bars solely because they cannot afford the smallest possible amount of cashless bail. That's an argument that gets made that, by the way, everybody says we need to work together to make sure that we have a system that's fair and just. I would offer that if you get busted with $1.2 million worth of crystal meth, if you don't have enough money to post bail, that's on you. That's bad planning. You're a bad criminal. You're a bad drug dealer. You're a bad businessman. This past Thursday, Allison Esposito and I were upstate in Monroe County. During a campaign speech, I was attacked by somebody who was a veteran, and as I noticed the veteran hat, I noticed that in his hand He had something that looked like brass knuckles, but they were a little different. They had two pointy daggers, kind of looked like a claw. And at the same moment as seeing on his hat that he was a veteran, which in my life means you drop your guard as low as you can possibly drop it, he was lunging towards my throat. Now, fortunately, I can thank my mother for paying for karate lessons when I was a kid. The training that I had, and I am a black belt, it was a very basic lesson from this drill, where if somebody is lunging at you with a knife, you don't try to go right for the knife. If you can gain control of their wrist, you can gain control of the knife in the situation, and especially when you're around other people who are going to be able to respond quickly to subdue and tackle that attacker. We shouldn't have to have this very real life, real world reality right now on the streets of New York, where people are scared about their 19-year-old or 23-year-old hundreds of miles away because they know that their son or daughter is riding the subway. Maybe they are wearing a yarmulke. Maybe they are Sikh, or they're a member of the Asian American community, and they're subject to attack. The cashless bail law in New York is resulting in people who are getting released back out on the streets who should remain behind bars. And Kathy Hochul was asked about this earlier this year, because New York City Mayor Eric Adams is one of the people begging for a major change to cashless bail. He's going up to Albany, begging people to do their jobs. And by the way, many of these state legislators who are part of the people he's begging to are individuals who represent districts in New York City. And not only are they not helping and responding positively to this request, this begging from the New York City mayor, they actually attack him. Danny O'Donnell is a state assemblyman. And for purpose of this example, he happens to be a white assemblyman. He went on social media and attacked New York City's mayor, who happens to be black, and suggesting that Mayor Adams' push for a major overhaul in cashless bail was somehow Mayor Adams being racist, that he was trying to target black people, that it was code for black when he was referring to dangerousness. This is a moment in time where the responsibility is for all of these state legislators to be heeding that call, because this is about keeping people safe. That's it. It's about the streets of New York being a place, the subways, homes, businesses, where people can go to work. They can feel safe in their home. They can go ride the subway and not see things and experience things that for a parent makes individuals, moms and dads, feel like it would be better parenting to take those kids down the strip of Las Vegas, and they will see less than what they will see through that trip in the New York City subway. We will protect religious freedom. We have to combat raw, violent hate. And there's a lot more that needs to be done with regards to making the street of New York City safer. Yes, we have a problem with rogue DAs refusing to enforce the law. We have a problem with mental health. We have a problem with homelessness. We have an issue in this state with drug addiction in this city. We have people being released early from their sentence who should remain behind bars. We have cop killers and murderers and rapists being released without caring to ask victims and victims' families for their feedback as to whether or not they think that's a good idea. We have correctional officers being attacked because of the HALT Act, being assaulted and put out of work. We have discovery law changes that have been made that have law enforcement scrambling to meet deadlines instead of being able to focus maximum attention on the spot to being able to do their job as exceptionally as possible. We have attacks on qualified immunity, where law enforcement officers have to worry about being sued, instead of just trusting their great training and their good instincts to make the right decision to keep themselves safe and everyone around them safe. We have attacks on law enforcement where they want to take away funding. There are people in government who are anti-policing. we know everything that needs to get done. But today we're here to reiterate our call to Kathy Hochul to repeal cashless bail. She says that the data doesn't support it. The media has asked her this question in response to Mayor Adams' request. Kathy Hochul says the data doesn't support it. I would suggest that she counts up all of the press clippings of all of the cashless bail stories gone bad. That number of counting all those press clippings can be her data that she's looking for. She gets asked about Alvin Bragg and says, well, he just got there, cut him some slack, he's doing his job. She gets asked about the Jose Alba case in Alvin Bragg. Well, that's just a local issue. I'm not going to get involved in that. We don't have recall elections in the state. You can actually argue that out of the 19 million people of the state, there's nobody whose job it is more to do something about a DA refusing to enforce the law than the governor of the state of New York. It's actually written into the New York State Constitution. After the United States Supreme Court just overturned New York's unconstitutional concealed carry law, she brings the legislators back to Albany to pass new laws. When all the legislators woke up that Friday morning, there was no bill. Think about this, there was no bill that Friday morning. By that afternoon, they were doing a bill signing. And Kathy Hochul said, well, what data do you have to support going after concealed carry permit holders? Now, mind you, a few months ago when she was asked about cashless bail, she says there's no data to support it, even though there is. When she was asked about this new push a few weeks back, she said, I don't need data. I just have to get this done. And they trampled all over First Amendment rights in that new law in order to trample all over Second Amendment rights. So that's why we are here today. We're calling for action. We're calling for action from Albany, which right now is controlled with one-party rule. We're calling on Governor Kathy Hochul to do what is right for New Yorkers who are desperate for safety on our streets and on our subways. They are desperate for leadership and accountability. One of the best ways for her to be able to do that is for this major overhaul of cashless bail, which I just outlined. Allison Esposito is my running mate. I'm proud to have her. She's just retired, 25 years in the NYPD. She was the commanding officer of the 70th Precinct in Brooklyn. Allison's father was an NYPD chief. Allison would have become an NYPD chief. And she knows firsthand from her position on the streets of New York why it is so important for us to do so much more, to back our men and women in blue, but also to enact key changes to what has been a pro-criminal push in Albany, turning our streets over to criminals rather than our streets being controlled by law-abiding citizens. A push in Albany to put the handcuffs on the criminal justice system instead of having the handcuffs on criminals. And there's no one better to be our state's next lieutenant governor than Allison Esposito. Allison.
Everyone. New Yorkers are suffering. New Yorkers are scared. Look at just today's local headlines. What was in the paper? We have 2 separate women riding subway trains that were sexually assaulted. We have an elderly woman beaten to death. We have a man that was hit by a car, and numerous individuals jumped out of the car not to see if he was okay, but to rifle through his pockets and rob him while he was down. New Yorkers are scared, and they have every right to be. Hate crimes are almost at 350 this year so far, up more than 12%. New Yorkers are scared, and they have every right to be. Government's #1 job is public safety and security, keeping their people safe. Kathy Hochul and this administration are failing miserably. When a government cannot keep people safe, we have the right to self-defense. And as we saw just a couple of weeks ago, when one of our citizens uses self-defense to save his own life, we have an administration that backs the charge of murder. We're living in an upside-down society where our victims are hailed as perpetrators and our criminals hailed as heroes or victims. It's unacceptable. What shot does the everyday New Yorker have at having justice if an individual who attacks a sitting congressman at a political event is let out within 6 hours on his own recognizance for what was an attempted murder? We are living in a society where criminals are calling the shots. Kathy Hochul likes to talk about data. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a cop. I was a cop for almost 25 years with the New York City Police Department. And I saw atrocities with this bail reform. I saw a baby as young as a year old in his stroller at a family barbecue, shot and killed by a stray bullet fired by a gang member that had multiple shootings, multiple priors, and multiple illegal firearm arrests, and had no business being out on that street, and that baby should be alive. Kathy Hochul wants to talk about data. Well, in the NYPD, we use data. We use comms data. But let me tell you something about statistics and data points. They're people. Every point of data is a victim, and every victim has a family. And every person who falls victim to a crime, it is a ripple effect through their family and their friends. And more than one person is touched by it. And every single day, up and down this state, in cities, out of cities. Remember, in Rochester, Thursday night, in addition to the assault on the congressman, we had 2 officers in Rochester shot, 1 killed. Because we are releasing hell on our police officers and making them public enemy number 1 by false media narrative and dangerous political rhetoric. Everywhere I go, I see New Yorkers, and they hold my hand, and they look into my eyes, and some of them with tears in their eyes, and they say, please, help us. You have to win. I'm afraid for my children. I'm afraid for my elderly parents. I'm afraid. I worked with the NYPD for almost 25 years, making it the largest safe city in America, and I'm very proud of that. And within the last couple of years, we're giving it back. The city and the state is being overrun by a criminal element, and everyday New Yorkers are becoming victims to it. Government's job is to protect its people, and we are here today to demand that Kathy Hochul use more of her time to protect her people and less of her time releasing campaign stops for her opposition. This isn't politics, this is people. Governor Hochul, your responsibility is to your people. Own up to it and repeal cashless bail. Thank you.
I, like everyone, seen what happened the other night, and as I was, in contact with many of the people involved, it struck me that the man who attacked Congressman Zeldin spent less time in jail than Jose Alba.
That's right.
And what was troubling more so is that the federal government had to come in and intervene to try and seek justice in this matter. But the problem is the average citizen is not going to be protected by the federal government. A sitting congressman might be, but the commuter on a train or the pedestrian walking down the street is not going to have a U.S. attorney come in and seek justice once a violent recidivist criminal is back out onto our streets. This comes down to one thing, and it's leadership. Sometimes you make a mistake, and real leadership is not to double down. Real leadership is to step back and say, we made a mistake, how do we fix it? Letitia James is tasked with being the chief law enforcement officer of this state. And she recently said she's against any changes in cashless bail because she needs to see more credible data. And quite frankly, that is a despicable mindset for the chief law enforcement officer of a state to have, because credible data means more victims, and one victim is one victim too many. Now, what we've seen is our opponents have adopted this anti-police, pro-criminal mindset. They've all, as a matter of fact, have proudly accepted the endorsement of the Working Families Party, whose questionnaire says you cannot support any changes to cashless bail, nor can you take support from police and correctional unions. And I echo what the congressman says. This is not Republicans or Democrats we're speaking to. Who we are speaking to is everyday New Yorkers, and that transcends race, gender, sexual orientation, religion. We are the people that are looking to restore a sense of what's right and wrong in this state and put victims' rights back ahead of criminals' rights. Because this cannot go on anymore, and we cannot be just treating victims as a quote-unquote statistic.
Happy to open it up to questions, and as Allison pointed out, it was within about 6 hours that this attacker was released. His words to me were, "You're done, you're done, you're done." As he was approaching my throat, he was charged with a violent felony, and he was released back out onto the streets. Earlier this month were the two Mexican drug cartel drug smugglers who were busted with the 1.2 million of crystal meth and then released. There was the person released on an arson for cashless bail who got rearrested on a double manslaughter in Yonkers. There was the person released on cashless bail who was rearrested after murdering 93-year-old Connie Torrey in Syracuse. These are stories of real lives, people with families. And whether you want to call it real stories, real people, real lives with families, or you want to call it data, what really isn't an option is for somebody to just ignore that any of this is even taking place. Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
So the District Attorneys Association and the New York State Bar Association all conclude that it's inappropriate for a district attorney to endorse a political candidate to attend a rally. So why do you have the Monroe County District Attorney as part of your campaign?
So originally when we rolled out our state campaign co-chairs, the Monroe District Attorney was one, but she had a conversation right away with the District Attorneys Association and reached out to me and told me that she wouldn't be able to be one of our state campaign co-chairs, even though she would love to be. She is somebody who is entitled to, you can attend a political rally that happens all the time all throughout the entire state where district attorneys are attending political events. I have no problem accepting the support. They are people who are concerned about safety and security, and the Monroe County District Attorney, by the way, happens to be one of the very best. But when I had spoken to her right after this attack had taken place, she said, I guess I'm not going to be able to be in charge of this, because she was present, she was a witness. So it was an instant decision that she made to recuse herself. And I support that decision. I agree with that decision, because she was present on site. I mean, I would imagine if there was video or pictures that were looked at, I mean, I was talking with her next to the stage as we were calling to make sure law enforcement was responding as quickly as possible.
However, she didn't recuse herself until actually the next morning. Do you feel like maybe, I mean, you often criticize Alvin Bragg for not charging high enough. Do you feel like you're going to have those same conversations in Monroe County, considering they could have charged higher and kept him in jail?
Well, she wasn't involved in that charging decision. I was asked whether or not I believed that the attacker should be arrested, which I expressed that I did believe that. I also expressed that he would likely end up being released due to cashless bail, and that's wrong. As far as the decision, I would defer to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. I will just tell you that the Monroe County Sheriff's Office was amazing that night. They were quick to respond. They were dealing with other cases when they were all called to this incident in Fairport. And while Allison and I were in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office right after the incident, they then got the call that they all had to go down to Rochester because two of their police officers got shot. In the middle of all of that, there was a decision made inside of that office to file what was a violent felony charge against the attacker. But From my understanding, the Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dorley was not involved at all in that decision of what to charge. And I would say in the Monroe County Sheriff's defense, having seen it firsthand that night, I saw them going through a lot. And it was going through a lot emotionally as they were getting pulled in different directions. Now, I'm not wearing a prosecutor's hat while I'm here, but I'm a former prosecutor, and I will tell you that when someone comes at someone else's neck, and I don't care whether they're a member of Congress or not, comes towards someone's neck with a weapon that can pierce that neck and cause very disastrous consequences very quickly, and you're saying, you're done, you're done, you're done, that alone is meeting the elements of some very severe charges that are on the books. Fortunately, the U.S. Attorney's Office intervened and they arrested this person and they charged him with a more serious offense, but they were only able to charge him with that more serious offense because I'm a member of Congress. As far as what decisions can be made at the local level going forward, that's something that can be worked out between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the local district attorney's office in deciding who's gonna run point, who's gonna go first, what they want to charge him with. The good news is the attacker, as of Saturday, was rearrested. And as far as anything else that the federal government wants to charge him with, or anything else the district attorney's office want to charge him with, they have that opportunity working with each other to decide what that is and who's going to go first and who's going to take the lead. And my understanding is that the Monroe County District Attorney has not been, is not, and will not be involved in that decision.
Congressman, how are you proposing that you're gonna accomplish this? You know, the mayor and the governor pushed for deeper revisions to the bail reform law, and the Democrats in the legislature didn't want to go as far as they want to. How are you as a Republican gonna come in and get them to go further?
So great question. So this is what actually happened in the timeline when the mayor made the ask for the major overhaul of cashless bail and went to Albany. Governor Hochul didn't back him up. At first, if you remember the timeline, when he went up there, that's when the media was asking Governor Hochul about the mayor's request, and Governor Hochul's response was, and by the way, at the time she was competing for the Working Families Party endorsement, her response was, we don't have any data to support that. Mayor Adams went up to Albany and met with the legislative leaders. And there was media reporting about what he might be able to come back home with as far as progress, and there was nothing. There was reporting in the media about how the legislative leaders were saying that the governor was on board with their understanding that there will be no changes whatsoever to cashless bail. Now fast forward in a timeline to the middle of March. On Monday, a new poll came out that said that I was beating her by 1.5 points. On Wednesday, she dropped the first puck at Madison Square Garden for the Rangers game, and she was roasted by thousands of people outside of the arena. On Thursday, the media was reporting that Andrew Cuomo was thinking about running for governor again. That night, in the middle of March, remember the budget's due April 1st, and after everything else that happened earlier in the timeline, the announcement came out that she was going to propose a change to cashless bail. No one knew exactly what it was. Then we found out what her opening point was in the negotiation. In the middle of March, she made a little bit of an ask of some tweaks to cashless bail, and then in the final budget, a couple weeks later, she ended up settling for practically nothing. So as far as the way that I would approach this versus the way that she would approach this, I would argue that there is plenty of data and statistics and stories and lives that have been impacted to justify a repeal of cashless bail. I would argue that there is a need for these state legislators to do the right thing by their constituents and to support, whether they want to call it a change of heart, or maybe they looked further into it, or developing changes, or maybe they didn't realize the impacts of cashless bail. Some of the legislators who had voted for it, if they are still there in January, they should be supportive. They should heed the call of the mayor of their own party. I would put it into my executive budget at the beginning of the process. I'm not going to wait until some poll comes out or some bad experience on the streets in the middle of March before I offer up some change. I'm calling for repeal now. I will call for repeal the first day I'm in office, and it will be part of that first executive budget. It'll be part of legislation that's submitted. I am all in. Additionally, mandates aren't just earned on everything by winning an election. You can't say, I won an election, I now have a mandate on how to do anything with regards to anything. Mandates are earned by talking about what you propose to do during a campaign. And then when we win on Tuesday, November 8th, and you all are writing your stories, the stories might be that the reason why Lee Zeldin just got elected as the next governor of New York, the reason why Alcin Esposito just got elected as the next lieutenant governor in the state of New York, the reason why Michael Henry just got elected as next attorney general in the state of New York, whatever the stories are, you write them based off of the issues that were publicly debated, and then you say, the people have spoken. They want cashless bail repealed. One other factor you have to keep in mind as you ask a very important question. Right now, there's a supermajority in the Assembly and Senate of Democrats. We can't assume, and shouldn't assume, and it would be inaccurate to assume that the current makeup of the Assembly and Senate will be the makeup of the Assembly and Senate in January. I believe that the supermajority in the Assembly and Senate are going to be broken. I believe that cashless bail is going to be an issue, as it should be, in state legislative races. And in some of these districts that might be bluer, hopefully you have incoming state assemblymen and state senators in those districts who are willing to take a stronger stand. Lastly, well, two quick other points. One is, the governor has a soapbox as a podium to be able to go into districts. That state senator who isn't giving you their vote on cashless bail and should be, and Governor Hochul doesn't do this. I mean, she hasn't even convinced herself that we need to do this overhaul, let alone having these events. But you could go into that state senator's district, hold a rally, hold a press conference, bring their constituents in, and say, even though your state senator told you this, he or she is not actually doing that up in Albany, and create the conditions through public opinion and our process so that that state senator is getting back into their car, driving to Albany and begging for a vote to repeal cashless bail as quickly as possible. The second of 2 points I want to mention is that there's something called home rule messages, where you have state assemblymen and state senators from places like New York City. They can't come home without securing a bill that's passed and signed into law that gives, say, New York City the authority to do something. So when the Speaker of the Assembly comes to me and says that he wants to meet with me on Bill A, B, and C, I'll say, that's fantastic. Let's schedule a meeting. I think it's great that we're getting together because I wanted to talk to you about Bill D, E, and F. Let's put an agenda together. So there are many different tools once you get to January. All of this collectively, it is night and day. There is a massive difference between the reality today under Kathy Hochul pandering to pro-criminal tax and spend Democrats controlling Albany, and what we will do and what we will have come January with the will of the people. Most importantly, the will of the people demanding this change.
Do you think you could get it done without dramatic changes to the legislature?
I believe that we will have changes of some unknown amount, and whatever that change is, because we don't know yet what the number is of people who support cashless bail as is and who supports a major overhaul, what that will be come January, whatever it is, we have to get it done because it's our job to get it done. Listen, we can debate, we can disagree. In this country, we encourage that. We end up with better final products as a consequence of people speaking up on what they care about, what they're passionate about. In Congress, Georgetown University does the annual bipartisan index. The last year that came out, out of 435 members of Congress, I was ranked number 19. The year before that, I was ranked 12, out of 435. You have a job to find common ground however possible. And those state legislators have a job to work with us, as we have a job to work with them to find common ground however possible to get this done.
Congressman, I want to ask you about the migrant situation here in New York. Our station has reported that families have been sleeping on the floor of the shelters. What do you make of the allegations by the Legal Aid Society that Mayor Adams has been blaming the border states, Texas and Arizona, for pre-existing problems in the New York City shelter management system? Is the mayor right that the city needs help from the federal government to take care of this?
You know, it's an interesting story and great reporting by NBC on it. You could really say that both are right. I mean, there were pre-existing issues with regards to homelessness in this city, with regards to mental health in this city. When you look at the factors that lead to someone in one of these sites, this isn't something that just mysteriously popped up anytime recently. Mayor Adams is also right, because there has been a surge of people who have been coming to the shelter who recently came across our southern border. So it's interesting the way that it might get pitted as if one might be right and one might be wrong. It's actually, interestingly enough, a situation where they're both right and everybody should work together. Now, I would offer that with regards to the situation on our border, that there is a responsibility, and I support Mayor Adams' call for the federal government to do more to secure our border. I believe that, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, that there's a lot more that can be done at our border. There's a travel agency, in a way, that the federal government is helping to run to fly people around the country. The best way to deal with the situation from the federal government standpoint is at the border during the entry process. But I will not say that Mayor Adams is wrong. I would strongly agree with him that it's absolutely been exacerbated. And I would say that the Legal Aid Society is also correct in saying that this wasn't an issue that just popped up overnight. It's been around for a while. And rather than any level of a blame game, if everybody, and I'll give, in good faith, I'm going to give everybody the full benefit of the doubt that they're all passionate about this issue, the best thing together is for everyone to work together to get it done. I would just offer that if they had a meeting and they figured it all out, it's actually still going to keep getting worse because of the situation that we're experiencing right now at our southern border. So it's really important that the city of New York has the help of the state of New York and has the help of the federal government. Because even if Mayor Adams was a superhero with a magic cape and magic powers, and he did everything in his power to solve this issue today, it's still going to get worse tomorrow because of what's happening at our border.
Just last quick thing, a follow-up to what Morgan asked on the main topic at hand. You've been pretty clear that when there's somebody who's released without bail in New York City, it's Alvin Bragg's fault. But when that same thing happens in Monroe County, you're saying it's not the DA's fault.
Well, what I say about cashless bail releases is that it's the fault of the state. When someone's released on cashless bail, there's no discretion. The prosecutor, the judge, and by the way, in many cases, they have wanted, in some cases they've even tried to hold somebody. I mean, we were all together in Riverdale when a year ago, there were Bronx synagogues that were being attacked with looters. It was a Thursday press conference that we had. And I said that this is happening not because the person who's doing the looting is confident that they're not going to get caught. It's that they know that when they do get caught, they're going to be immediately released on cashless bail. Sure enough, a couple days later, the person ends up getting caught. The judge in that case tried to set bail. And then there was massive blowback, and they said, you can't do that. And he reluctantly had to release that person. So for all 62 counties of the state, when you see a release on cashless bail, that is under New York state law. My criticism of Alvin Bragg is primarily twofold. One is when he came in, starting with his day one memo, he said that across the board he wasn't going to enforce all sorts of offenses at all. Even though the law is what it is, he's just not going to enforce all these laws. And then all of these other laws, despite what the law says, he was going to treat as lesser offenses. He did it on day one. The second part, more recently, was that I was highly critical of his handling of the Jose Alba case. The fact that Jose Alba is a law-abiding, innocent, hardworking New Yorker who, in a moment of self-defense, makes the decision to defend his life, not seeing any other options, and Alvin Bragg chooses to go after Jose Alba and send Alba to Rikers with an open stab wound, which is a civil rights violation. You can't do it. You need to deal with that medical injury. Charge him with murder, ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of bail, and not charge the person who stabbed Alba? I criticize Alvin Bragg for his entire handling of that Alba case, and Governor Hochul said she wasn't going to get involved. I credit the public outcry, the public pressure for why Alvin Bragg ended up making the decision to reverse it. But as far as every single cashless bail release that we have seen across this state, that is a consequence of New York state law requiring certain offenses to be not bail eligible.
Just a quick clarification. So you're saying that the district attorney is no longer a part of your campaign, although she is listed as a co-chair on your website?
Yeah, well, you're talking about the press release that was originally sent out. So we post all releases as is. So when a press release goes out, we post the press release onto the website. After the press release went out, the district attorney, Sandra Dorley, had a conversation with the DA's Association, contacted me right away and said that she's not going to be able to continue to serve as one of the state campaign co-chairs. But there isn't, as far as I know, there isn't any list on the website that says, hey, click this link and read this list of our state campaign co-chairs. The only thing that I know offhand that I can think of is that part of that archive, you could go back through the archives in every single one of our press releases so that you and the media can figure out what we put out and when. That's why that is there. So you go back and look at it, and you're gonna see the full list as is in the version that we had originally sent out. Yes. Are you with the media?
Yeah, I'm with the New York Post.
Go ahead, sir.
So Monroe County sheriffs and prosecutors could have charged your attacker with a more serious crime that wouldn't have allowed him to be released on bail. Do you think your case is an example of cops and prosecutors undercharging an accused criminal?
I don't know if you were here a little bit earlier. Did you come in a little bit, just a little late?
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. So I did, and the only reason why I asked is because I mentioned this a little bit earlier.
Sorry.
So the Monroe County Sheriff's Office that night went through a lot. They had a lot going on, and then they got called to Fairport for what happened
With the
on stage. And then while Allison Esposito and I were at the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, they got a call over the loudspeaker to respond to 2 Rochester Police Department officers who got shot. The question that was asked to us, was asked specifically to me, was whether or not I thought that the suspect should be arrested. My answer was yes. I publicly expressed as well my concern that this person should not be released on cashless bail. I said that before he was released, hours before he was released. I said I was concerned that he may end up getting released on cashless bail, and he was. Now, some people are critical of the DOJ and saying that they didn't respond fast enough. Meanwhile, I've heard from others that it was actually quite incredible how quickly they put this case together, they arrested him, and he was in jail with what was a more serious charge that can only be charged because I'm a member of Congress.
Do you think that response came quick enough?
You wake up on a Friday morning, if it's within a day or so, you have a case together, as detailed as I understand that they did, putting together multiple agencies. My understanding is that people were, flying into Rochester from all over, taking it extremely seriously. I have absolutely zero reason to second guess any aspect of the federal government's quick response in taking care of this case. As far as the path going forward, because he's detained right now. He's been detained since Saturday. On Wednesday, he has a hearing. My understanding is that there's a bail hearing on Wednesday where there might be an update. The federal government can communicate, the U.S. Attorney's Office can communicate with the District Attorney's Office. My understanding is that the District Attorney in Monroe County, Sandra Dorley, will not be involved in that charging decision. Whoever is can work with the U.S. Attorney's Office in deciding whether or not anyone wants to add any more serious charges at the federal level and or at the local level. and can make a decision as to who should take lead in going after it. But I will just tell you, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office is not here right now. I will tell you from having witnessed it firsthand that they very much had their hands full in some of the worst possible ways for a law enforcement department being stretched thin unexpectedly that night. There is an opportunity for all parties going forward to communicate with each other and decide who's going to take the lead, what additional charges, if any, they want to go after, but not for anything. This was a violent felony that this attacker was charged with, a violent felony that he was charged with, and then he still got released on cashless bail.
Congressman,
Yes, one last question.
you're pitching yourself as the public safety candidate in this race. I guess how do you square that with last month you said you supported the Supreme Court ruling on the concealed carry gun law. Law enforcement officials have said that that law was important for public safety, and according to public opinion polling, more than 70% of Republicans did not want that law reversed by the Supreme Court. How do you square that?
Well, for one, the reason why that decision was even issued by the United States Supreme Court interpreting the United States Constitution is because the law was unconstitutional. I signed on to the amicus brief in support of that case. I believe that the Supreme Court made the right decision. There's two different kinds of people who have firearms. And too often they get merged as if they're one group, two different groups. There's a law-abiding New Yorker who wants to safely and securely carry a firearm solely for self-defense. And there's a criminal who with an illegal firearm commits crime after crime after crime, and because of the system right now in this state, they're still back out on the streets committing crimes and people are getting hurt. I am with everybody else in wanting to have a conversation to figure out every option on the table to deal with every criminal who has an illegal firearm, someone who's not a law-abiding citizen, where we can end that on our streets. I will do everything in my power to protect the rights of a law-abiding New Yorker who wants to safely and securely carry a firearm solely for self-defense. Now, when the governor called everyone back the next week to pass new laws, she went so far in passing these new laws that actually many of the editorial boards, and I'm thinking of one editorial in particular, I believe maybe it was the Albany Times-Union, where they have been supportive of laws that have been going after Second Amendment rights, where I would disagree with the Albany Times-Union on particular laws in the past. We can have that debate. They were criticizing the new laws that were passed because they were trampling all over First Amendment rights to trample all over Second Amendment rights. And when all the legislators woke up that morning, there was no bill. By that afternoon, they were doing a bill signing. They were rushing. They didn't ask the county sheriffs, do you want us to pass this law? Do you have any suggestions on how to make the bill better, even if we don't end up passing it? They contact the county clerk's office. Do you have any advice on how we can make this bill better? How will this bill end up complicating your lives and the lives of your law-abiding constituents? And because they didn't, and they rushed to pass this, you end up seeing, by the way, the Sheriff's Association came out against New York's concealed carry law that's now on the books. You've had clerks flipping out because of what it means practically of what they had passed. And they rushed it so quickly by saying that you cannot carry in parks. And we're all used to, there's areas of the state where you have a little park. Go visit the little park in your community. Well, there are parts of the state where there are really, really big parks covering counties. Many, many counties are all inside of a park. So you had folks raising their hand in a whole lot of geographic area who just got disarmed by the state, saying you just included the Adirondack Park, all of it. So that's the problem with rushing to legislate, because you're trying to get inside of a news cycle. You're trying to get attention for being quick to respond. Well, you ended up fallen on your face because you rushed to do it, and in a way, where law enforcement has been strongly opposed with what they did, and I would credit the rush to getting it done as the biggest reason why the mistake was made. Thank you all.
Thank you.